The scariest moment of my life happened when I got bored one day. My family took me ice fishing to Pine View Reservoir, which, is this lake out in the middle of Utah. And I was about 9 years old. I remember sitting on my bucket. If you've never been ice fishing, you sit on this little bucket, you hold a tiny little pole, and you look at a little hole in the ice and wait to pull little fish out of the little hole. And it's boring as all get out if you are a 9-year-old. Maybe other people like it, but I couldn't stand it. So I gave my pole to my mom and said, I'm going to go exploring. Now I got 30 feet away from my family, and on a January afternoon, I stood on that lake and I heard the ice break beneath me. My mother screamed and I fell through. I just remember instant pain sort of rupturing in my body, and I knew at that point in time that I was going to die. Now I'm going to make a case today, or hopefully a good case, that reading, at least for me, close critical reading, can often help with trauma that we experience as people. Now, I am going to start off by saying a good book, a great book, can never replace even a decent therapist. I need to point out that trauma is different from phobia, which is different from anxiety and depression. All of them are serious in their root cause. Most of them I don't have any experience or even right to address. I can only really speak to my own life. I do know, though, that relating to hardship is the missing component, at least for me. When you feel alone in your pain or your fear, it just gets worse. And when you try to find others to share in that grief, they often have nothing to give you other than a positive, it'll get better kind of comment. So if you can find your strength in a story, whether it's fictional or not, hopefully that helps. Today, I'm going to share with you 4 different books that cover a range of experiences that end up beautifully, and hopefully somebody watching this video will find support in that. All right, let's get philosophical. Okay, let's get into the books. So the very first one I want to share with you is a wonderful memoir. Let's start with the term memoir. This is the story of somebody's life having gone through something. And so if you're experiencing a difficult challenge, feel free to Google memoirs related to X, right? And you can see how other people have dealt with these things. Suleika Jaouad wrote Between Two Kingdoms, and this is her depiction of how her life got interrupted by leukemia. It's a beautiful book, and I highly encourage you to check it out. I've never had cancer. I've never had any kind of challenge with my health like that, so I can't relate. But if I did have leukemia, I would probably enjoy reading this book because it would give me some sense of meaning. Now, there is a really great interview that Rich Roll did with Suleika. I'll link to it in the description down below. It's about 2 hours long, but it's really good. And it's another outlet for people struggling with leukemia that hopefully will help them find hope. In fact, let's watch a few seconds of it, and I'll show you exactly what I mean.
Yeah, my mom, who's an artist, painted one small ceramic tile every day, and she, at the end of the project, assembled them into a shield and hung it above my bed.
Did she do the tiles that are in your house?
No, she didn't, but
else.
I do have that shield, and she made me a second shield when I had my recurrence 2 years ago. Although the second shield is made out of hundreds of woven hospital bracelets from the last 2 years. And I was really reluctant to participate in this project. When you're in a hospital bed, people are always pressuring you to be positive, to stay strong, to find the silver lining. And all, those pressures made me want to punch everyone who walked into my hospital room in the face. I did not.
Okay, so let's stop there for just a minute. I actually love that statement. The pressures of everybody trying to be positive made her want to punch everybody in the face. And when people can't relate, all they can do is try and be positive. And of course they have good intent, but that's not really what we need when we're suffering. We need somebody who can understand what it's like to deal with this. And again, if you're going through a trauma that's not very common, maybe a book can help. The second book I want to share with you is Achilles in Vietnam. This is a nonfiction book where the author, Dr. Jonathan Shea, compared the experiences in Homer's Iliad, which is one of the greatest pieces of writing of all time. It has really influenced so many things in our culture and society. But here, if you know the story, there's a man named Achilles who is given a prize for helping to win a war, the prize of a beautiful woman. I know it's old, whatever. But the point here is that prize was given, and then his leader, Agamemnon, took that prize back. It was a betrayal, essentially, okay? And that betrayal caused Achilles to pretty much lose his mind, turn his back on the army, and just a whole bunch of people died because of it. Lots and lots of trauma. So in Achilles in Vietnam, what Dr. Shea did is he realized that so much of the trauma that soldiers experience is not just related to the death and destruction, but to the betrayal they feel on the battlefield. They will get wounds and shrapnel and lose arms and legs and eyes and everything else. Those are physical elements that they can often deal with. The real problem, the thing that bothers soldiers the most, is the fact that their leaders often sat behind safe lines and made decisions that caused a lot of death, and those decisions were often inept and incorrect. So this is a powerful book if you're a soldier. Now, again, I have never been to war, and I've never been led by generals that just threw me into the battle to see what would happen. But if you've gone through that and you're struggling, this is a really beautiful book that might give you some hope. All right, everybody. This book recommendation was given to me in the book club that I lead, starting with the book Beartown by Frederick Bachman. It's actually a trilogy. The second one is titled Us Against You, and then the third one is titled The Winners. So I've got to stop here. These books are probably some of the best, if not the best fiction I've read, at least in a very long time. Bachman, for whatever reason, has this ability to put humans on paper. So, when you read a book and the author just feels like he or she is trying too hard, it's just overdone, it's not quite genuine or authentic. I don't usually feel emotional when I read a book, but on almost every page of this series, I felt like excited for the characters, terrified, in love. I wanted to just reach through the page and shake people at times. It's just an emotional read in a very good way. And here's why. There are a lot of characters in here that are going to experience trauma. He puts his characters through a whole lot. But what's nice is that the characters fight and they deal with their trauma and they get through it. And most of them do it in a beautiful way that makes you really fall in love with them. So there are a lot of different things in here. I don't want to spoil them, so I'm not going to say what kind of trauma this might help you with. But if you are feeling like life is just tough and hard and you want to see some people get through some really interesting stuff, check out Beartown by Frederick Bachman. All right, this might sound ridiculous, but when I fell through the ice at 9 years old, I didn't have a support group. And then when I was probably 22, 23, I came across a book called The Life of Pi. You've probably heard of it, and you might have even seen the movie. The Life of Pi is a story about a young man who falls off of a ship into the ocean, winds up on this small little raft with a bunch of random animals, tigers and orangutans and all of that stuff. I didn't have any of that happen to me, but I did fall in the water and I did experience that feeling of drowning. And as I read this book, I didn't come to it looking for emotional support. I didn't even know what it was about when I picked it up. I just knew that everybody was talking about it at the time. But as I got to the section where he fell in the water, I shut the book and I set it down. I had that sort of visceral reaction that brought me right back into the ice. In fact, I remember telling my wife that I needed to go for a run. And at the time we were newly married, we lived in this little trailer park that was like a circular road, and all of the trailers were parked around the road. And I just ran around that loop. I don't know how many times. I just ran until my legs ached. And when I got back, I took a shower and I picked up the book again and I kept reading. And I do remember crying when I read this book. And I cried not because it made me feel the experience I had, but because this was a character who had experienced something similar and survived. And he turned out okay in the end. And so I think stories have that ability to, again, not fix everything. It doesn't make it go away. It doesn't replace a therapist, but it helps. Before we wrap up, I do think it's important to point out that we need to read critically if we're going to actually get support from these books. It's one thing to read for entertainment and to just burn through a book and sort of go, oh, that was great, and set it down and read the next one. But if you get into a book that hits an emotional chord for you, it really is valuable to slow down, take some notes, and apply the ideas. That's the mantra I teach in my reading community. I would really encourage you to hit pause when you feel something. Perhaps go for a jog around the track and think, do some journaling or what have you. If you have a therapist that you're working with, take this story to your therapist and talk about how it's affecting your thoughts and your ideas. But it's definitely something that you'll get more out of the experience if you take time to be with the story. Hey, if you found this episode helpful, I would love for you to head over to thereadwellpodcast.com and you can subscribe to the newsletter that I share every week with people in the community. We have almost 1,000 readers there now. Each week I share ideas on how to read deeply. I also always share a book recommendation that I have personally vetted and spent a lot of time studying and reading. So if I share it, it's a book that I love that I think you'll find value in. Again, thank you so much for watching. And if you find this video helpful, feel free to share it with somebody who might have experienced something traumatic in their lives. Hopefully it will help. All right, I'll see you all next week.